yet. Alrighty, you guys, so welcome on back. It is a bit of a special episode, I guess, a double feature. We're going to be cranking through 2 episodes of It, Welcome to Derry. Now, there's a lot for us to work through. I'm hoping it won't take us an absolute eternity, but these episodes were dense. Especially the 4th one, there was just so much going on. And then the 5th one, so much. There's just so much. Oh my God. So we're going to work our way through it. Bear with me. Bear with me. It's probably going to be a really long episode today. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning on in. As always, you guys. Really do appreciate y'all. Gooby, he's right here. He's laying, sleeping on the floor. But yeah, let's not waste any time. Diving right on in. It, Welcome to Derry, episode 4. This episode is called The Great Swirling Apparatus of Our Planet's Function. I love that name. As the kids face increasingly terrifying experiences, Charlotte attempts to advocate for Hank, and General Shaw escalates his efforts. I really like how we get to see more of, like Shaw's and Rose's relationship, but how that also, feeds into the narrative of natives versus the government. And I love that we are diving more into that. We get a lot more insight during these episodes as well into the actual culture of the native population around Derry. And I really appreciated that. So as the episode starts, we are looking down Derry's main street as the kids are riding their bikes, and they ride over to the police department, hand over photos to Captain Bowers. And I like how you see the different kids, how they handle the police. Like Ronnie, very wise. Ronnie and Will are very wise to not say the wrong thing. And Lily is around that point too, but I feel like her naivety kind of gets her in trouble a little bit there. And then Richie just is talking up a storm like they're pals. And you see everyone else looking at him like, dude, chill. Richie is very enthusiastic with Bowers, who is not impressed at all. He doesn't seem to believe either way. And Bowers does give them grief for being in the cemetery at night. They just say that they were just cutting through and just happened to have the camera. He's nearly interrogating them. But they open up the folder and look at the photos, and they reveal that nothing was actually there, or at least nothing popped up in the photographs. So of course it makes them look crazy. Bowers is just like, oh, fuck these kids. The only photo that still remains is the photo of Pennywise. Or is it Periwinkle, his daughter? Because of the specific hair with the little bells on the end. Could it be Periwinkle? There's some good hints that have been revealed since this episode, but we need to get to the juicy bit of it first. But of course, Bowers and other cops, they just think it's a statue in the cemetery. And he threatens Lily to send her back to Juniper Hill. And this makes Rich and Will side-eye both of the girls. Bowers tells them to stay out of police business, or ghouls and goblins will be the least of your worries. And as you can see the helplessness setting into their faces, the intro starts playing.
A smile is something special.
Now, I don't know if the intro has begun to change by this point, but the intro does change. The intro song, specifically. It gets creepier, almost more atmospheric. You can tell there's a lot more dread coming in. And we switch on over to gym class, and we see the group of kids speculating that it works essentially like Dracula. Can't see his reflection, can't take a photograph of him. They feel like it's messing with them because it could have killed them if it wanted to. And Will suggests looking into the history of Derry to see if things like this have happened before, kind of carrying on the legacy of how Mike's character in the later timeline, but the earlier movies, how he was the history guy. I know that they kind of turn it into Ben's thing, but in the books, he's not the history dude. It's always Mike. And the kids contemplate who they can tell and deduce that no one will believe them. Except Lily thinks she might know someone. And then we cut to the diner, and she's with the nurse from Juniper Hill. Now, she is speculated to be Pennywise's daughter, Periwinkle. We know that her name is Mrs. Kirsch. Mrs. Kirsch was the old lady in the second movie who was Bob Gray's daughter. So she is Pennywise's daughter. See where we're catching up? And the scene where Will sees Periwinkle standing outside in the yard, you get like a POV shot when Leroy goes out into the street and is calling out. If you then check kind of the general area of where that POV was coming from, it was coming from a car that looks exactly like, well, it's the same car. It's the same car as Mrs. Kirsch's. So something tells me she plays a very significant role in everything that's going to go down, which is a little crazy because she feels so comforting. Like, it's such a different manipulation tactic for it to take. And Mrs. Kirsch mentions she hasn't thought about it in years, but there was news of kids going missing in the 30s. Quite a few, actually. And she just kind of blamed it on it being the Depression, saying like sometimes kids would just go missing in the middle of the night to help relieve the burden on their families. But I also feel like those kind of socio-political things is also what Pennywise, whatever you want to call it, feeds off of. But says it's nothing like what Lily is describing now. She tells Lily that with friends by her side, she can do anything. Scene changes up. We see a local newspaper title about Ronnie's dad, and it's being read by Charlotte, who hears a knock at the door, and it's Rose. She brought over things Charlotte had bought, and she invites her in for coffee. Now, I really like this dynamic that's being built as well between Rose and Charlotte. I think it's going to be like a really foundational relationship. I also am hoping it's one that will keep the Hanlons safe. For now, at least. Because actually, if we remember back to the first It movie of the newer two that came out, Leroy is still alive in that. He works in the slaughterhouse with Mike. So he's still alive. So there's that. I'm hoping Charlotte will survive. But they could also just do whatever, really. Rose begins describing to Charlotte like her heritage and her people's connection to the land and animals, how they used to follow elk through Canada, and she kind of like chuckles when she says before manifest destiny, but like, no, that's a very specific time marker for the native population. And Rose actually brings up the pipeline, almost trying to like gauge Charlotte and Leroy and how much they're involved in it. But she tells her he's a pilot, so has nothing to do with that. Not that he'd tell me if he did, she says. And talks about the secrecy of his work, and she questions everything, and he questions nothing. I do like that we see a shift in that, where Leroy starts to demand answers. Charlotte asks Rose if she needs to be concerned with the news of the missing kids from the movie theater. And Rose gives her a very kind of like stern look and says, Derry is beautiful, but things do happen. Keep the people you love close. And Rose gives her number as an extension of friendship. So I am excited to see how that relationship is going to grow more as the series continues on. Because I also think there's like cultural implications to their relationship, and then tying in like Dick Halloran and Taniel's kind of relationship, you know? And then the scene does change again. We see the boys driving to their newly appointed hangout spot. Old bunker style cabin deep in the woods. This will later become the Black Box, which gets burned down. There's a lot of little clues to it, like, oh, we're going to turn this into a great little joint. There's going to be a bar over there, live music. Like, they're setting the groundwork for it. And then we also get reference to Halloran's later job as a cook. He says that he couldn't cook there for them. And while Halloran is inside cleaning with the other men, he senses something. So his shine must be telling him, like, this location is going to have major negative energy. Skip again, we see the kids in school watching a tape about surviving a nuclear blast. We see Bert the Turtle again, and Lily looks over at Marge, who gives her a smile. Now let me tell you what, Marge, I still don't trust her 100% yet after these 2 episodes, but she's a real one, I'll say that. Cut to, I know, Will rides his bike home, going into his room and searching through his drawer when Charlotte comes in holding the photos they got of it. She asks what's going on and says, and don't lie to me. Like, she's so strict with him when she needs to be, but I don't think it's necessarily strictness. There's a respect. Will knows that he's respected as an individual by Charlotte, so he trusts her in that. She also trusts his judgment, but at the same time, like, she has very legitimate fears about the safety of her son. Will explains to Charlotte that he's just trying to help Ronnie, explaining everything about the movie theater, and she notices how scared Will gets, saying someone came after them. She tells him school and back, that's it, until she knows what's going on. Of course, Will's upset by that. Like, the implication there is he can't see his friends anymore. Later at dinner, Leroy asks Will how his first week went. He seems nervous. So Charlotte says, there's a girl. And Will's all embarrassed. He asks to be excused so he can work on homework. And Leroy asks Charlotte, so the girl, I mean, is she... giving Charlotte a funny look, and she just kind of chuckles or kind of bursts out laughing a little bit, implying, like, is she black? That, like, specification, because it threw me for a loop a little bit, and I always have to kind of put myself back into the time period. It's going to play a very crucial part in this. The idea of the controversy surrounding an interracial relationship. Charlotte asks if Leroy is working this weekend, and he just kind of blankly says he doesn't know, waiting on a call. And Charlotte recommends Leroy and Will get out and go do something together. Even then, Leroy is just kind of like what? Cut to, we see Leroy and Will out fishing in a creek, and Will asks how long they have to do it, just very... obviously bored. Leroy tries talking to him about his new girlfriend, but Will catches a fish and ends up losing it. But they're having a great time. They're bonding. Leroy goes to the car to grab another fly lure, and while left alone, Will notices a koi fish, which I thought was very interesting, that a koi fish, of all fish, was swimming up to him in Derry, Maine. Now, I know that there is connection with, it's the Korean War, I believe, right? Maybe it was World War I, so maybe, like, Japan has something to play in there. Maybe that could be it, because he sees the vision of his father after a plane crash. But as the fish swims, like, away, a hand pops up and drags Will under. We see that it's a burned up Leroy saying, "You'll burn too." Leroy pulls him up, and Will tells him that it was him, all burnt up like when he went down in the plane. Leroy is like, you're not making any sense. But then he sees marks all over Will's arms and knows that something bad happened. And you can see, like, the fear in Leroy's eyes. And then they both see a red balloon floating over the water. We switch scenes, and we are in Clint Bauer's office. Now, I thought it was interesting. Anytime we hear about Russian ships or Cuba over specifically the radio, it always ties into it somehow. So I wonder if that is, like, related some way. I don't know. Just a question for future. Because it also could be seen as, like, fear-mongering as well, right? And in comes Charlotte Hanlon to speak with him, and she tells him about what the kids saw, and he just kind of brushes it off. She brings up how if someone is still out scaring kids, then they might have an innocent man in jail. This leads Charlotte to asking specific questions to gauge how they are treating Grogan. Hank Bowers doesn't seem hateful towards Charlotte, but he is extremely dismissive, and you can tell he's annoyed. He says this isn't the South, but there's still not a welcoming feeling. Now, I did notice that Charlotte begins muting the colors of her wardrobe when she goes out into Derry. That does change a little bit, so I don't know as though this theory really holds. But I think on certain days where she's trying to be more like subverted in how she maneuvers through this town, I think she wears duller colors. She ends up calling and visiting with Hank Grogan's mother, talking about how her activism in the South could potentially help Hank, and Ronnie is there as well, overhearing all of this. But his mom doesn't think it will help because he wasn't where he said he was at that time, and no one can really prove that, or prove what he was doing in that time period. And even though it's proof he lied, it's not proof that he killed the kids. We head on back to the new hangout spot for Dick and his friends. They're cleaning and drinking beers, and Dick brings out some trash and gets a sudden ringing and intense pain seeing visions of the drain. And I thought this was his mother. We find out it's his grandmother. He was raised by his grandparents. And she tells him to watch himself and keep that lid on tight, warning him. So this is almost like I don't know what the right word would be, like a spiritual guide, med tech, whatever you want to refer to it as, guardian angel. She follows him through and helps him in certain situations. And right then, Leroy pulls up and asks him about Project Precept, what they're working on. Halloran tells him to not be so eager to put himself in the line of fire. Leroy questions this, and he's having a no bullshit moment with Dick. He stops him and is telling him about what happened to Will earlier. And Halloran even seems scared. Will asks him again what they are actually looking for, and Dick just kind of snaps, yelling he doesn't know. He does what he's told as he's told to do it, just like Leroy. And again, I got kind of the theme, I guess, of the military using Black Americans for their skills, but not respecting them enough to inform them of the dangers involved. Switch to, we're back at the water tower with the kids, and Will goes over nightmares he had of his father crashing like he did in the war. Says it could have killed him, but didn't, talking about it in the river. It's playing with them like a predator plays with its prey. It's feeding off their fear. And the kids think of what they can do to stop their fear. Now, I'm going to be honest, I don't like this as a plot point. It happens in this episode and it happens in the next one as well. I don't know how many times it's going to be used, but I'm just going to put it out there. I don't enjoy the fact that they have kids popping basically a Valium in the middle of school or in the tunnels. It's The next day at school, Lily hands out some of her mom's medication and calls it Mommy's Little Helper. They plan to take it whenever something weird starts to happen so they won't be afraid. In class, we see them learning about parasites that take over snails, and we see that glare again in Marge's eyes as she's instructed by the head patty cake to get Lily's attention. So you know something shisty is happening. Marge apologizes for what a shit she's been lately and asks Lily to join her for lunch. Just the two of them. Lily seems slightly surprised, but agrees, says that'd be swell. And you can see Marge just kind of sits back. She seems a little relieved, but also still tentative or nervous, like kind of looking over at head patty cake. Then the scene jumps and we see Charlotte drive back up to the police station. This time though, she is spotted by Russo, Hanlon's like partner guy. She was granted permission by Grogan's mother to see her son, but the cop that's like checking her in, he is also being extremely non-helpful. Now, if you didn't love Charlotte's character before, you definitely should after this scene, because she ate. He threatens to arrest her. Essentially, she threatens him with calling organizations to help. He says, "Excuse me," and she just, with a smile on her face like the queen she is, says, "No, I don't think I will." Oh, I love her. And threatens to use her connections in the movement if she is not allowed to see Hank. I mean, Charlotte stands on business. Next scene, we see Charlotte speaking with Hank in a little interrogation room. They charged him without a bail hearing, which shows discrimination, and she encourages him to tell the truth about that night. Hank, however, pushes back big time. I mean, it clearly scares him just as much as the thought of going to Shawshank, of revealing what was happening. I thought maybe he was gay. But again, I had to remind myself of the time period, and then it made sense with the conversation that Charlotte and Leroy had earlier about Will. Well, about Will and Ronnie. We find out that he's been having an affair with a married white woman. He's terrified of what would happen to her if her husband found out. He's also clearly terrified because, like, well, he knows, like, they'll just skip prison and bring me right to a tree. I thought for a second, like, could this be the woman that also called him in? Like, she was really, really upset. So could she have maybe called in being like, realizing she was sleeping with what she thought was a killer? We'll find out who the woman is though, just wait. But it also seems like his fears of what will happen to her and of being lynched are greater than his fears of having to go to Shawshank for allegedly killing children, which really just puts the weight of the situation onto the audience. We switch on over and we see General Shaw's cleaning a gun in his office when an officer tells him they checked where Rose told them to stay away from and found nothing. So already showing that, like, Shaw can't be trusted by Rose. He proved that. She gave a little bit of information, said don't go here, and then they went and dug anyways. And Shaw is concerned that they are confirming the tribe's suspicions. Like, yeah, no shit. And Shaw knows about the time slot the weapon can be used, implying like the 27 years of dormancy it experiences. And then he notices a file which has photos of Rose's nephew and others scoping out the base, and Shaw suggests inviting them inside. Switching up, at lunch, Lily and Marge are talking about Lily's new friends and, you know, Rich, Will, Ronnie, and asks her what Ronnie Grogan is like. And Lily says that she isn't there to gossip. You can tell Lily's just like so done with the patty cake bullshit. Marge asks to just start over. She says, "Screw the patty cakes. I don't want to lose you." Again, asks if they can start over. And then this guy walks up and says hi to them. His name is Tim Flanagan, we find out. And he kind of like shoots a look at Lily. Marge says he obviously likes her and tells her to go say hi. Except Lily wants to go freshen up in the bathroom real quick. And this is when we find out that it's all a setup by the patty cakes to humiliate Lily. We see the glare again in Marge's glasses in the bathroom as Lily is freshening up and going to the bathroom. Marge starts second guessing the prank. You can see like she feels bad about this, seeing how excited Lily gets. And right as she's about to tell Lily, her eyes start to hurt and literally push out of her head just like a snail's. This was such a disturbing scene, honestly. Like, I know the CGI has been a little iffy here or there, although I did see there was some practical effects in this. They just kind of like blended it all in, so you can't really tell. But what a horribly graphic scene. It's making the baby at the very beginning seem just dull in comparison, honestly. This was a hard scene for me. I don't know why, but having to rewatch it once for like the recording and then another time for taking notes, I was just like, oh my God. Her screaming like, Marge, you're too good of an actress. Lily gets scared and tries to take the pill when she drops it in the toilet and reaches in to get it. She ends up not taking it herself. She gives it to Marge. It is so ew. Just ew. Marge is running through the halls crying and goes into the wood shop and attempts to cut off like her eye stalks. When that doesn't work, she uses a band saw and cuts through her eyes with it. Ugh. Oh my God. I'm saying this was a rough freaking scene, but I don't even know what to fully believe with it. Cause it's like, you see her injure both her eyes, but then only one of them is somewhat hurt later on. I don't know. Marge tries stabbing her eyes more as Lily wrestles the utensils from her hand. And as Lily is trying to save her, the rest of the school runs in, only seeing Lily on top of bleeding Marge with a sharp utensil. But this is where I noticed Marge's eyes aren't how they originally were when this all was happening. Now only one of them is injured. So our like grim conclusion there, I guess, for Lily for right now. We'll see where that goes. Marge does redeem herself, in my opinion, but gotta wait. There's also speculation that Marge is actually Richie's. Is it Richie? People are speculating that Marge is his mom. And we transition to Charlotte cutting tomatoes, which is just a foul scene to cut to, like the eyes just gross. She gets startled by Leroy, who asks her why she was in town going to the police department. Obviously, Russo had talked to him. She's trying to help Hank Grogan. He tells her, don't be looking for trouble. And she claps back with, there's going to be trouble anywhere we go. That's the country you swore your life to defend. Ate him up with that. Because that's also part of the conversation we've been having, is how Black Americans felt just completely used. Like, why would you fight for a country that didn't even represent you? He says that she promised she wouldn't start up here in Derry, and you can see how conflicted she is. He tells her to trust him and not stir the pot, and she gives him a very packaged answer, which I love. Even he could tell. She was like, okay, sweetie, but this isn't over. Essentially, without saying it. She was like, you won't have to worry about me. And she just goes back to cleaning. Oh, so this is when... Okay, so this is the scene with the car and everything that I mentioned earlier. Sorry. I kind of forgot which episode this was for a second. Will, in bed later that night, tries to sleep, but keeps getting startled by the vision of his father in the river. And he gets up to look through his telescope, eventually landing on what might be Pennywise, might be Periwinkle, standing in front of his yard. It's a very, like, abrupt, jump scare. He screams like hell and runs, making Leroy charge into the room. Will is cowering in the corner. He says, someone was looking up at me from the yard, and Leroy turns to Charlotte and says, you see what you did? Someone's watching the house. We know it's not that, but that just makes your stomach sink so much. Especially with like how quick Leroy was to jump to that conclusion, tells me they probably had to leave their last location because people were getting upset that Charlotte wouldn't just be quiet and complacent. Leroy runs outside, is shouting for them to show themselves, but no one is around. You just hear dogs barking. However, we do get a kind of POV shot looking at Leroy when he's in the street, and when the camera angle changes, you see that it's coming from the direction of a car that is also what we later find out is the car of Mrs. Kirsch. Leroy hears rustling as he walks back in and sees a red balloon caught in the tree and seems to feel himself being watched. So I definitely think Mrs. Kirsch is involved in this some way, right? She's gotta be. I do love, though, that we really see a change in Leroy's character, and especially with how he interacts with those higher up than him once he realizes what danger his family is in. He takes such great pride and great protection over his family, and I like that we don't see his character falter to that moral standing, I guess. We almost do. The next episode is crazy as fuck. Will almost takes a fucking AK to the face. Next day, Leroy charges into Shaw's office demanding to know what the hell he has them chasing. And this is when we are brought to an interrogation room where Rose's nephew Taniel is handcuffed to a chair. Dick enters and Shaw says Halloran is going to answer the question of where it is for them. You can see Halloran's very just like confused, not sure. Taniel spits in Dick's face as he presses him to just say where it is. And I didn't like this depiction of Halloran. The depiction you're given in the Shining movie, he's a very warm man. And in the book as well, Dick is such an incredible character. And even in Dr. Sleep, his character still from like beyond, because how his grandma acts as like a guardian for him. He becomes a guardian of Danny once, he obviously passes during the first book. And it's just, this is a very different depiction. And I'm going to chalk this up to more Dick being influenced by the military, because that's just not the vibe you get of his character. I don't know. And maybe like this stuff that's going to happen is why he had such a soft spot for Danny later on, or for kids in general. I don't know. But I don't like this depiction of Halloran. He's much scarier and very sinister. Pushed to harm the natives also has immense historical context here in the United States. Dick forces his way into Taniel's memory, and I loved the depiction of the multiple doors of thought. That's something that King has written about extensively, and we're going to even see the lockbox metaphor, which is used in Dr. Sleep. I believe it's not mentioned all that much in The Shining, but it goes into it more in Dr. Sleep about what this like lockbox is for Halloran and how Danny can use that as well. But then we see that feeds into Danny's addiction later in life. It's a whole thing. And Dick finds the right door and enters the memory of Rose, telling Taniel the story of the Galoo. And we find out it is in the western woods of Derry. We learn about their ancestors and how they used shards from the meteor it fell from, using it to keep it in the woods, living in harmony, not hunting from its land, until colonizers came and unleashed it, ignoring the natives' warnings, forcing the native people to find more shards and bury them to contain it in the woods. I really loved the depiction of the Galoo, or it. Started off as like this really terrifying like zombie moose, and then once the settlers came in, like this new depiction of fear for the natives was adopted by it. We see it turning into like festering white people, but they look like nasty, just covered with disease, inbred almost, even like very much The Hills Have Eyes or Wrong Turn. And even the priest, the depiction of the priest was terrifying, so sinister and evil. And we learn about Sesque, the great warrior who fought the Galoo looking for the shards. And the scene of her getting like stabbed, crazy, this little like baby thing, little creepy guy coming out of the priest's chest and stabbing her, like, what? And her daughter, Nakani, is the one that got the shards to bury. One is buried in a turtle shell around the woods to cage it in. And that is what is now Derry. Dick now knows to look for the 13 hidden shards. And how the memory like cuts off for Taniel, who's remembering it and like kind of reliving it as a kid, it's so disturbing. Like Rose shuts off like halfway. She's just like, and he just stands up and gets right in Taniel's face. And it's like you're talking to a little kid, like, or the memory of a kid. Like, it feels so sinister. And his smile too really adds to that. It says Taniel can tell him where they are. He opens a door and a blinding light leads them to the house on Neibolt Street. And he says, follow the tunnels and you'll find the pillars. And that's where it cuts off. I know that there's been a lot of, I guess, criticism that this show is moving really slowly. It's a TV show, so yeah. Duh. I do get that. However, I just think the world of it and just the kind of like multiverse of Stephen King, it's too incredibly dense to fit into a 8-episode, it's only 8-episode series. But I have heard speculation that this is going to get 2 or so more seasons, which would love. But yeah. So with that, let's head to it. Welcome to Derry, episode 5, and this one is titled 29 Neibolt Street. As the military descends on Neibolt Street, the kids head into the sewers with their own objective. I did see speculation that, like, it's weird how the house on Neibolt Street always looks the same. No matter which film we see it in, it looks exactly the same in each one. That wouldn't be the case, right? So, like, could the whole house be fake? Potentially. I mean, we do find out in this episode as well that it has completely contaminated the groundwater of Derry. So that affects the residents as well. What's your baby on? Big sleepy baby. So, diving on into the episode, Halloran comes to in the interrogation room and Taniel is unresponsive, essentially drowning on his own spit. And we see that Halloran is also extremely weak as Hanlon has to hold him up and confirms that they got what they were looking for to Shaw. And we see that Leroy is now the one questioning everything that's going on. And Shaw reassures him and says he will get answers. And we switch on over to the hospital and we see Marge in a bed having her eye bandaged up, scars and stitches like around the underneath like side and on her eyelid. And she wakes up to see Lily has come to visit her. And even the nurse acts worried or even scared of Lily, says like, I'll be right outside if you need anything. Hi, big baby. Let's get that eye boogie. Oh, sweet baby. My co-host for this evening, Sir Goobert, would you like to say something to the people? He just wants lovin's. Marge informs Lily that she told people that Lily didn't do it, said that her glasses broke and cut her eye, and that Lily was only trying to help her when everyone showed up. And then she even says that she would be sent to Juniper Hill too if they knew what she saw. And I thought this was a really redeeming moment for Marge. I was very, speculative of her character. I still am, but this helped a bit. Marge apologizes to Lily, says Lily is her best friend, and she let her down. The two start discussing just what the hell is happening, and they have no idea. You can see Marge is extremely scared. And we kind of see Lily stepping up now almost, kind of being the brave one for a lot of the other kids. Holds her hands and telling her she won't be alone. It's a really sweet scene. I also see like a reflection between Lily's character and Mrs. Kirsch, the nurse. Oh, I feel like we should also maybe talk about the very obvious, very obvious growth spurt that all of the kids went through between what seems like episode 4 and episode 5. They did. Strikes happened and everyone was not allowed to work for 8 months, I believe they said. Yeah, it shows. It shows. And it's a little drastic. Like, they went from baby-faced to... Oh, no, those are like young adults. Later, we see Lily and Ronnie walking up the observatory with Rich and Will. Ronnie still hasn't seemed to learn that, like she's still on the, well, then you can go to the police and get my daddy freed. Like, girl, shut the fuck up. Respectfully, I love Ronnie's character, but when are you going to pick up that that's not possible? Like, and even they turn to Will at one point, and he's the one that has to keep reaffirming to her, like, you know, that's not going to work. And Rich even confirms everyone believes that Lily attacked Marge and she's only covering for her. Real great. Once at the top, though, they hear a cough come from an old yellow tent. And it's very Georgie-esque, that yellow, you know? The kids arm themselves as Maddie comes crawling out, pale and sick. He looks like a mini Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead. You know what I mean? He does. He says, "Help me," and collapses as the theme song begins.
A smile is something special.
And this is where I specifically noticed that towards the second half of the theme song, it starts becoming darker, more sinister, and there's a lot more background noises, but you have to like really turn it up to hear it. Cut to, we are back in Shaw's office, and he is informing Leroy of the pillars used by the native population surrounding Derry. Leroy seems highly speculative, or possibly even shocked to learn that Derry is essentially a prison to this thing. This is also where we learn that Taniel is a member of a secret order dedicated to keeping it locked up. They've been doing it very well for hundreds and hundreds of years. And we learn that Shaw wants to reduce the size of its cage to contain it. That's what he says. That's what he tells Leroy. But yeah, I knew from the beginning, Shaw was not one to be trusted. It seems like everything that comes out of his mouth is a frickin' lie. And Hanlon even clarifies that now they want to catch it. And we find out that the house on Nebolt Street goes directly down to where the 13 pillars are buried under Derry. And Leroy gets assigned with Colonel Fuller to lead a small team down to find and secure the pillars, reducing the size of its cage. What essentially is a death mission for anyone. Shaw really truly believes that he can control it. Leroy is mad, though, that Shaw knew this thing was here and let him move his family to Derry. However, Shaw then turns it around and blames it on Leroy for choosing to live off base. Implies he'll be moving Charlotte and Will out, and we are seeing Leroy's professionalism as a soldier start to diminish as he sees like through their facade. And I think we're seeing the role of him as a father and as a member of his family that's starting to take priority. Switch to, we are back in the Watchtower. This is a very scattered episode, you guys, okay? So we're going to be jumping around a lot. Back in the Watchtower, the kids ask Maddie where he's been. He says in the sewers below Derry. That's where it lives. He gives them the full breakdown on what's happening with the clown. Says it kept some kids alive to feed off their fear. And says that he ran away when it slept during the day. And confirms the other kids are dead too. Maddie talks about how it ate their brains right in front of him. Except for Bill, who can't talk or move, but he says is still alive. Maddie refuses to speak to the police once they suggest they should go. Of course, Ronnie being like, "You could save my dad." But Maddie refuses, saying he doesn't want to be sent back to his dad's, threatening to run back to the sewers instead. He said, I would rather go back there than go live with my father. Cut to, we see a small meeting of council members discussing its cycles, part of the native council, but it's a much smaller group. So we're seeing that, there's like this secret kind of faction within the tribe. Or maybe not even secret, it's just those are the only people it involves. They do state that it's been a lot milder than in 35 or 08, I'm guessing 19. They said there were 25 disappearances, 7 confirmed deaths, mostly children. And we learned that it sheds also and has tainted the groundwater of Derry since its founding. And they noticed that the town's residents are acting more erratic and dangerous. They mark the time of the augury, one final tragic event that marks the end of the cycle, after which they get another 27 years of peace. So I find it interesting, the very different perspectives we get on how to handle it. Like you see the kids in the first couple of movies, they just want to completely destroy it. And then you see the military, they want to capture it and manipulate it and use it for their advantage. But then the native population knows it can't really be defeated, but it can be contained, so it can be lived with. I find that to be very interesting, just the different ways that we're seeing how people deal with it. I think if we also want to think of it as like this causer of trauma, how these different groups view it could also be maybe thought of how different groups view trauma and how to move on beyond that. Maybe just a thought, the military wants to use it against you and use it to control you and gain for themselves. Others just want to squash it down and stuff it away. And then others realize you have to live alongside it. At this point, a man runs in to grab Rose. She asks where Daniel is, and he just says, I couldn't stop him. And we see dread set into Rose's expression. Switching on over, Ronnie's dad is being transported to Shawshank in a bus as a crowd of angry townsfolk gather around, including Charlotte, who watches everything unfold. As Bowers threatens Grogan, saying essentially, will you survive 1 week or 2? A man who from what he says, we find out he is Phil and Susie's father, runs up to Grogan and points a gun at him. He was going to shoot him. He was. However, the cops stop him at the last second and he just fires straight up into the air. Everyone is panicking, and as everyone's just running around, Charlotte sees a cop in a window just menacingly smiling at her. And as people run by, we see his image change a bit, and he has the Pennywise buck teeth, and then he just vanishes. And later we see Charlotte on the phone talking to someone saying that she's fine, just shaken up. And this is where the color theory kind of disproven a bit. She's wearing bright yellow, and she was wearing bright yellow out that day as well. But she's still working to help Hank. And Leroy comes in, clearly very concerned, asking where Will is, and then very seriously tells Charlotte that he needs to tell her something. And as crazy as it will sound, she has to believe him. And you can tell there's so much trust between Charlotte and Hank. I think that comes from maybe his work, that he just has to, or she just has to trust, that what he is doing is important. But him coming in, and you can see the fear in his eyes. She knows. You can tell she's, holding herself up a bit. And then when she kind of realizes the severity of what Leroy is feeling, you can see her kind of, sink back and realize. But switching to, we are back in Shaw's office, and on the news we see coverage of protests happening in Mississippi that turned violent once the police showed up for black voting rights. And Rose comes charging into his office demanding to know where her nephew is. Shaw says that he is safe, and once the operation is complete, he'll be released. That's crazy. And she calls him out on his lies, including the water pipeline. And he comes clean and says 5 years prior, he was given a drug by the Department of Defense, and that is when his memory came back to him, not once he returned to Derry. I knew this had MK Ultra vibes to it. I just knew it. And he ended up telling them the secret that she made him swear to never share. Entirely for his own gain as well within the military, and tries to make himself out to be the hero of it all. Says it's to keep the country safe. As if that's what they weren't doing already? Huh? And Rose is absolutely shocked to see that Francis really believes that he can put a leash on this thing, assuring him that it can't be controlled. But he pushes back and just says, "We'll see." She reassures him if he truly remembered what happened, he wouldn't be doing this. She then finds out that Taniel told them where to go, the house on Neibolt. She extends her help, but Shaw turns it down. She says at the very least to let her prepare Taniel. Their lives depend on it. Through everything, she still cares, but also doesn't want this thing out. And we'll see. Rose, while the military has their plan, and they think they're always one step ahead, Rose is always like 2 or 3 steps ahead. And I love that. You can just as soon as he says something, she already knows what to say next. She already knows, essentially what they're going to do. And as this conversation is happening, we see it cut back and forth between Rose going in, into the back of her closet to a safe, and she pulls out one of the shards. We see that Rose is reunited with Taniel in another interrogation room, and the guard is standing in the open doorway the whole time. He tells her that they went into his head and memories. That's how they found out about everything. They are speaking their native tongue, looking over their shoulders, but he does tell them, speak in English. And you can tell that now, everything's kind of going into code a bit. She doesn't want to tip them off. She says they'll have a better chance of finding what they are looking for with the shard. She hands it to him, saying they know he is the only one who knows how to use it. She knows this is inevitable and wants him to be protected while allowing it to essentially wipe them out. She said, well, if you're going to go in, I know what the inevitable is. You're going to die. At least I can keep my family safe. The guard takes the shard, saying he won't need it until the morning, and ushers Rose out. As they hug goodbye, she tells him to keep it close and he will be safe. Switching on to... In the car, we see Will in the back seat with his parents up front as they pull onto the military base with all of their belongings in the back. So it was pretty freaking damn quickly that Leroy was like, let's go. Because the military base is also right outside of Derry, so it's not within the premises of its area. You know what I mean? Leroy even says should be far enough outside of town that they should be safe. Will asks what about his friends, but is told he will see them when this is all over. And he says it very sternly. Switching scenes, we see Lily going and visiting Mrs. Kirsch, and that is also the old lady that met with Bev's adult character in the second movie. We do learn that this is in fact Pennywise's, aka Bob Gray's daughter. Whether it's really Bob Gray or Bob Gray taken over by it, I don't know. But she greets her at the door saying that she needs to talk to her. And Lily tells her about Maddie and his fear of the police. And suddenly Mr. Kirsch appears looming over them. Now this is a very different persona than we were given of him in his butcher shop, because it's the same dude. Very different. He was so sweet to Charlotte, and now he's so mean to his wife, asking where his steak is and telling her not to overcook it again, like a threat. She seems to want to persuade Lily not to go, but it almost seems like she's leading her with clues. You can't go down there by yourself, when Lily hadn't mentioned even doing that. She's almost kind of planting little seeds for Lily. And even though she makes Lily promise her she won't go down there, like Lily is just kind of teary-eyed as she says promise. Jump back to we see Will eating dinner and Charlotte is in the kitchen. And she checks in asking, it's not so bad, right? But he just asks if he can go for a walk, explore the base. If he has to be stuck there, he might as well see around. He's kind of pulled back again. But before he goes, she reassures him that he will see his friends once his dad says it's safe. He hugs her and says that he loves her. Oh my God. The Hanlons are the only family, the only bloodline within this town that genuinely seem to like care and love each other. I mean, all the other parents like just always seem so sinister, but Charlotte is just so warm, and so is even Leroy. But it's just such a stark contrast to the other parents we're given in the It universe. In the background, you hear news report of someone trying to chop down someone's leg or something's leg with an axe. I think this is related to the Paul Bunyan statue again, which we kind of completely never heard of again, so far at least. And then Charlotte hears a report of the bus that was transporting Hank Grogan to Shawshank crashed and that he is now missing, leaving behind multiple casualties. It just keeps making Hank look like the absolute worst monster. And as Charlotte reaches to call someone, another headline saying the streets between Center and Niebolt have been closed off due to a reported gas main leak. We, however, find out that that's just covering up what is really happening there. I found that to be really interesting, kind of funny too. Like, oh, let's just say it was a gas leak. That'll, keep people away. No one will come sticking their nose in. And then very quick cut scene, we see a bunch of soldiers moving in and troops and vehicles just surrounding the house on Niebolt. Switching back over to the kids, we see them up in the watchtower and we overhear Rich talking about losing 9 planes, trying to get them to reach Main Street. This has to be important. Why are we focusing on those planes not making it past the tree line? It's gotta have to do with something, right? It has to. Lily brings up Marge with her. Ronnie isn't trustworthy of her whatsoever. She's like, I'm supposed to trust a patty cake? Marge just replies, X. Lily stands up for her though, saying it came for her too, and she agrees that they can't take Maddie to the police. She concludes that their only option is to go down and save Phil so he can clear Hank's name of the murders. Lily, I think you're getting a little too bold for your britches. Maddie refuses, but Lily holds him to it. She says if he won't go to the police, then he's taking them down there. Lily also pulls out more of Mommy's Little Helpers, and Rich is the only one to ask if it's even safe after Lily says her mom eats them like M&Ms. I just don't like the rhetoric around that. I don't. And then it being involved with such young kids, it's like, ew. I understand, but it still just makes me feel icky. Lily shares an analogy her father told her about in life. People are either anchors or lifeboats. They drag you under or they keep you afloat. Lily is grateful to have her friends, but right now, Phil has no one and won't stand a chance without them. And she asks if the others are either anchors or lifeboats, and everyone agrees lifeboats. That's when Will runs up the stairs asking what he missed. A really sentimental moment, my guy. That's what you missed out on. Then the scene changes up again, and we see military men debriefing a room of soldiers, telling them their friends in the marsh told them the house on Niebolt Street was built atop an old ground well that dates back to colonial days, disclosing what they are looking for: 13 Indian artifacts. And that's the specific phrasing they used. There is a differentiation between how the military speaks of the native population and how the native population speaks about themselves. And as we hear the debriefing, we see a swarm of soldiers sweeping through the house with Daniel. And we learn that the old well is the only way to get to the 13 pillars. We also learn that Halloran is there with them, including Leroy and Polly. They lower themselves down the well, the same way that we saw the Losers Club do later on. And as they do, we hear them being told to shoot anything that rationally wouldn't be down there. Daniel leads them through the sewers, looking down at the shard as it's just black. We know that it glows. It's not glowing. Suddenly, Halloran hears his name whispered from behind, sounding like his grandma, and he asks if anyone else heard it, but no one seemed to. Daniel drops into a deeper tank and keeps leading them deeper into the sewers. We see them all jumping down into the deeper water to go. When it's Dick's turn, he keeps hearing his grandma calling to him. And when he jumps into the deeper section, he goes under into this vast just body of water. And he swims towards a hole that's starting to close above him. And as he comes up out of it, he's in the tub in his childhood home, completely vanishing from the operation group, causing them to search for him. Or only some. They get split up so quickly, it's like, were you guys even trying? He pulls himself out of the bathtub and sees his grandma telling him that someone is coming for him again. Footsteps approach as his granddad opens the door, carrying a box that's chained closed with a gun in his belt. Now, the Stephen King nerd in me geeked out when I saw that box, because oh, the emphasis that's put on these boxes, specifically in Dr. Sleep, is so much. You know the importance of this, specifically to Halloran, because he's the one that we learn of this method from. And the box is basically just a place where you put all that trauma. You just put it in a box and lock it away. And he just says, "Hey, Dickie, it's time." Two of the other soldiers, now looking for Halloran, suddenly hear a noise coming from one of the pipes, followed by the chuckle of Pennywise. We see that their weapons and electronics start to fail as it gets closer to them, and we hear footsteps approaching from one of the sewer drains, and a gloved hand comes forward pointing at them, and it's just uttering, "I want you." And it comes out as this zombie Uncle Sam. It's a little cheesy, but it makes sense. We do see the deadlights glowing in its eyes, and it kills them before they could even shoot it. Polly and Leroy, though, hear the screaming and call out for Halloran. Cut to, we see the kids traveling under train tracks, making their way to the sewer entrance, led by Maddie. I saw someone point out that because the train was double stacked as a cargo train, that couldn't be possible because that type of train, whatever, wasn't available until the 70s or something. King probably explains it at some point over 5 pages in his book. I'm just saying. Once they are standing outside of the sewer grate, they hand out 3 pills per kid. I'm just thinking, Jesus Christ. That's a fucking lot. Cut to again. It gets so jumpy, you guys. Daniel leads General Shaw until he tells them they're close. Shaw calls back, realizing that Halloran isn't there, and neither is Hanlon or Russo. They all got completely split up so quickly. As Shaw is distracted, Daniel runs off, but they open fire at him. Oh my god, dude, it's so obvious for their characters, makes sense. But, it just pissed me off. They're calling out because they need his help, and yet they're shooting at him? It's so weird. However, he drops the shard, but keeps on running. Cut to again, we see Maddie, who is leading the kids in deeper. I don't want to spoil anything just yet, but yeah, the fact that the kids are being led into the sewer where the military are, and they've been told, shoot anything that shouldn't be down here. Cut to, we are back in the childhood bathroom of Dick Halloran, and he's cowering on the floor from his grandfather, who is upset at Dick and his wife for having secret conversations using their shine. He thinks, they're talking about him, plotting against him. His grandmother tells him to not let him get in his head, and his grandfather is just mocking him. I mean, it's pretty obvious what is being presented as his grandfather is just it wanting to get into Halloran's lockbox, because all of those things can then be used against him. It says power like this was meant to be used, and this absolutely terrifies Dick. He knows what is in that box. He encourages Dick to open it, threatening him as Dick defies him, and he just starts getting in his face, or you'll what, and his grandfather shoots Dick's grandmother in the leg, then says they'll open it together, tracing around the box, teasing the lock until it busts open on the count of 3. And as the chains fall, we see how terrified Dick is, having it all unleashed on him. And all his secrets used against him, all his fears. Then we cut back to the kids. They start to realize that they took too many pills as things become very distorted. They have trouble speaking to each other. Yeah, it's kind of funny, but it's also not. Rich and Marge holding hands was cute. We can see though that Maddie isn't affected by the pills like the others. Cut back to Hamlin and Polly talking about how bad it smells. Leroy's just well, yeah, no shit. Look where we are. And they start to think that they could be lost, being split up from the others. We can see how unnerved Polly is by everything, and Hamlin's kind of having to talk him down a little bit. Suddenly, we hear Charlotte calling out to Leroy, calling for help as she runs forward in the sewer towards them. He asks what she's doing down there, and we see that Polly can't see her, making Leroy realize that she isn't real. And as their weapons start to flicker, she starts to change and charges forward at them. Leroy shoots her in the head, which terrifies the shit out of Polly because he still has no clue what Leroy is seeing. And as her body floats towards Leroy, she turns to smile at him with a very Pennywise face before sinking into the water and just swimming off. And Leroy reminds him, if you see anyone that shouldn't be in here, you kill them instantly. And he's very shaken up by this, so you can tell okay, he's on edge. He knows. Switching on over, Maddie leads the kids to a chamber with a dead end. They hear someone shouting for Halloran from behind, so they're very close to military-trained men that have been told to kill. And as the kids get scared and Marge recommends going back, she bumps into the corpse of Susie floating in the water. And it's graphic. It's graphic. I do kind of enjoy a bit of the corniness with the kids, though, to be honest. I don't know, it just feels nostalgic of yeah, obviously it's a little childish, but it works when you're kind of looking at it through the eyes of a child. But the floating bodies are graphic. Maddie is completely unfazed as the kids discover the bodies of Teddy and Phil, who is in fact dead also. So the boxes and everything was just more tricks from Pennywise to lead the kids into thinking that maybe they could be okay. As they are, freaking out, Maddie starts swinging around the pole, singing Down with the Clown. And it's just like very catchy. It's creepy, but it's catchy. It's just all of the tunnels are underground where none of the children will ever be found. As this creepy tune starts playing, Lily trips over Maddie's corpse, realizing it isn't Maddie that led them there. And as he sings, he slowly transforms into Pennywise. This is such an incredible, grand entrance. We've been waiting, okay? Waiting to see Pennywise. And now, finally, he's here. And he just comes out with such a bang. They knew it was going to be really anticipated. The way the back of his head cracks open, you see the mouth, and then the costume starts billowing out, and literally Pennywise is growing out of the back of Maddie's head. It's so visually cool, and just the way he's swinging around, chef's kiss. Pennywise chases them back out, but Lily trips and is left behind. Switching back to Leroy and Polly, they make their way through the tunnels more, seeing an exit, but hearing someone call out for help. And it sounds like kids. You guys, the scene was so tense. It was so tense, and yes, I cried so hard during this. Oh my god. We see Will run out of the sewer as Hanlon has his gun aimed right at his head. This time, though, Polly sees him too. And Polly tries to stop Hanlon, but he's so quick. And Hanlon shoots, and the bullet goes right into Polly's chest. He saved Will, but now Polly is bleeding out in the sewer. It was so sad, you guys. I literally thought to myself, if I'm crying this much over Polly's character, Lord help me for the rest of it. Oh my god. Also, I didn't realize he's like a Vine star back in the day, and now he's doing something like this. That's so cool. And the other kids run out. I mean, they all are witnessing what's happening. Hanlon tries getting Polly to leave, but he says he just wants to rest, telling him it's okay and to make it count as he dies in front of the kids. The group hears it from the pipe, and Leroy tells them to get out as he carries Polly away. Cut back to Lily. We see her running lost in the sewers, terrifying. She comes to a dead end, calling out desperately for help. Pennywise appears behind her, cornering her against this grate. Thanks her for convincing everyone to come and see him, because she's such a good friend. But such a bad daughter, as he transforms again into the chopped up version of her dad. He runs forward, ready to eat her, when he stops, seeing the shard under the water in front of her, causing him to retreat back. And you can see, in his face, he, pauses and he's like, "Oh, you fucking bitch, I would have got you." I love the subtleties in Bill Skarsgård's character with Pennywise. I just like when you can tell something annoys him or pisses him off. He's just like, Lily grabs the shard as it glows, so now she has it. That's going to be so interesting. I wonder what she's going to do with it. Cut to... We see Mrs. Kirsch leaving her home, and she climbs in her car, the same car, it's the blue car. I think this is the first time we see that is actually her car. As she adjusts the mirrors, we see Hank Grogan hiding in her backseat. Total fucking jump scare. Just seeing him in the rearview mirror scared the shit out of me and her. He tells her not to turn around or say anything and to turn on the car and drive. He's splattered with blood, and like, this doesn't feel appropriate for Hank, you know? Like, we know he isn't a bad guy like this. So it feels weird, but he's being so ominous and threatening. She pulls off in the woods and gets out of the car and just starts making out with him. The fact that she is the married lady, oh my god. Which would make sense. Wait. Also, canonically, Pennywise then would be kind of gay. Although, it is specified in the book that it has eggs, so it is female. So, I don't know. He tells her that something attacked the bus. She tells him to stay with her, that they are combing the woods, and he's terrified, but he says there might be someone who can help. Back on the base, Charlotte is brought to the gate for a visitor, and we see it's Ingrid Kirsch. She says they have a mutual friend. Now, I find this very interesting. If that is Pennywise, then how could she make it to the military base, right? How can she make it outside the perimeters of Derry? You know what I mean? Unless she's like a living agent for this thing. I don't know. This is so interesting. The scene jumps again. We see Hanlon is giving his deposition about what happened in the tunnels. Clearly very torn up. He lost his best friend, and he was the one that killed him. Shaw walks in and apologizes for his loss and assures him that, quote unquote, these people will answer for what they led them into, blaming the natives for like their own stupidity. Like, they were warned. Yeah, Daniel, ran off, but you were going to be fucked either way, my guy. Like, and now he's almost like declaring war on the native population. Before Shaw can ask any more questions, though, Hanlon says he just wants to be with his family. So it's like you can tell Shaw really still doesn't care. He's just interested in getting what he wants. Before he leaves, though, Hanlon asks about Dick Halloran, finding out he hasn't reported back to base yet. Shaw is unsure of how he would have made it out. So just like how easily they were willing to like kill off someone that was such a high asset priority to them. However, we do see Dick slowly walking out of the sewer. Seems very defeated, almost shell-shocked, also very disoriented. He sees another soldier stumbling off to the side, and as he turns around, we see it's dead Polly. And then the scene cuts, and we see that Halloran's lockbox is fully open, unleashing all of his worst memories. Now, I'm really interested in those last two scenes. Like, what's the implication of him seeing Polly? And then what's the implication of his lockbox being open? I'm so excited for the next episode, you guys. I know there's only 8 episodes, so we're getting there. Stuff's really going to start happening. This episode really kicked it up a notch, I must say. And I'm just excited about it. I'm excited to see how the tension with the native population is going to play out. Something tells me, like, the U.S. government is not going to come out on top in this. But that's also what I would like. I fear it's going to be more historically accurate. So it's going to be like, burn it all down to the ground, kind of. I don't know, though. Well, we will have to wait and see. I have not seen the trailer for the newest episode, so no idea there. I know there's some stuff with the patty cakes, like, there's so many plot lines and whatnot in this series, and I enjoyed that. It's going to give us so much just like catharsis, I feel like, when it all wraps up in the end, but I don't know. Like I also said, I think this should be a multi-season series so we can just really dive into this. But let me know your thoughts, guys. I really enjoyed these last 2 episodes, even though the first one that we covered was very, plot dense, I would say. A lot of the first few episodes were. I understand we have to establish a lot. I mean, it is literally one of the largest pieces of literature in King's collection. So, like, makes sense. We're going to really need to spend some time really flushing out all these characters, their motives, their inspirations, their stories, and their histories. Like, and I just think it's being done so well and in such a creative way that, like, it's not relying too heavily on the written text, but at the same time is still canonical to King's universe. But yeah, let me know your thoughts, guys. Like and subscribe, all that. This is a long one, I know. Bear with me. Thank you so much, you guys. I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.